I am Julian, 29 years old. Exactly 1 year ago, I packed a single worn-out suitcase in the dead of night, booked a one-way flight out of the state I had called home my entire life, and ran from my own flesh and blood. While I was still trying to process the grief of losing the only man in my family who ever truly saw me, my grandfather, my mother called me. She didn't ask how I was holding up. She didn't offer a shoulder to cry on. Instead, she looked me dead in the eye through the cold, unfeeling static of a phone receiver and said, "Your brother could use that money more than you. He has kids, Julian. Transfer it to him or don't bother coming home." My own parents thought they could bully me into giving up a massive real estate inheritance simply because my older brother played the ultimate family man card. They laughed at my quiet life, publicly humiliating me to anyone who would listen, framing me as a greedy, selfish villain taking food out of my nephews' mouths. But there is one thing they didn't know. My grandfather's lawyer had already legally fortified the estate in my name with ironclad precision, and I had quietly installed a state-of-the-art security system at the property they thought they could steal. And right now, as I speak to you, my brother is standing on a porch in the dark, staring directly into a camera lens, slowly realizing that he messed with the wrong son. Before I tell you exactly how I turned the tables on my deeply toxic family, please hit that like button if you believe in justice. And don't forget to let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Now, let's go back to where this absolute nightmare began. The call from my mother, Eleanor, came on a rainy Tuesday evening. I was standing in the cramped kitchen of my modest one-bedroom apartment, stirring a pot of cheap pasta. I had just gotten home from my corporate job, exhausted, my tie loosened, my mind miles away, when my phone buzzed on the counter and her name flashed on the screen. A familiar knot tightened in my stomach. Conversations with my mother were rarely pleasant. They were usually transactions. I swiped to answer, bringing the phone to my ear. There was no, "Hello, Julian." There was no, "How was your day, sweetheart?" There was just a sharp, commanding breath before she delivered the blow. The attorney handling my grandfather's estate had called her. He had informed her of the broad strokes of the inheritance. And my mother, in all her calculated glory, decided to intercept the reality of my life before I even had the chance to grasp it. She told me, in a voice that sounded like it tasted sour in her mouth, that my grandfather had left me the house, the entire, fully paid-off suburban property, plus his sizable investment accounts. Lucas, my older brother, the absolute center of my parents' universe, was only getting the old family boat. I stood there in my kitchen, the wooden spoon freezing in my hand. I literally blinked at the wall, trying to process the words. I let out a nervous half-laugh, thinking it was some kind of twisted joke. My mother doesn't joke. The silence on the other end of the line was heavy, brewing with dark storm clouds. She didn't congratulate me. She didn't say she was proud. She just paused, letting the chill settle over the connection, and then delivered the line that would echo in my head for months. "You know, your brother could use that money more than you. He has kids, Julian." It wasn't a suggestion. It was a royal decree. In her mind, and in the collective mind of my family, the mere fact that Lucas had a wife and 3 children completely invalidated my existence. It meant my struggles, my quiet life, my empty apartment, and my child-free status disqualified me from receiving any form of kindness, fairness, or financial security. I didn't argue with her. I didn't scream. I just quietly hung up the phone. I stood in the dim light of my kitchen and felt the last remaining thread connecting me to my family's snap. I didn't cry. I actually smiled. It was a cold, hollow smile of absolute clarity. For years, I had bent over backward trying to earn a seat at their table, and in 5 seconds my mother confirmed I was never even in the room. That night, I didn't send a dramatic response. I didn't blast my feelings on social media. I went to my laptop, opened a new tab, and booked a one-way flight across the country. I logged into my banking portals, changed every single password I had, and enabled 2-factor authentication on everything. I completely locked down my life. I called a high-end security firm and paid an expedited fee to have a comprehensive camera and alarm system installed at the inheritance property the very next morning. Then, I turned my phone on silent, tossed it onto my bed, and packed my bags. When I woke up the next morning, the screen of my phone looked like a war zone. I had exactly 43 missed calls. Most were from my mother, several were from Lucas, and there was one single, glaring voicemail from my father, Richard. I sat on the edge of my mattress, coffee in hand, and pressed play. My father's voice didn't just speak. It boomed. The rage was palpable, vibrating through the small speaker of my phone. Julian, you listen to me and you listen to me good. You are tearing this family apart over pure greed. You transfer those assets to Lucas by the end of the week, or you are dead to us. You don't deserve a dime of that man's money, and you know it. Call your brother and fix this. I deleted the voicemail. I didn't save it. I didn't listen to it twice. I just erased his voice from my life. I grabbed my suitcase, walked out the door, and headed to the airport. I thought the worst of the storm was over. I thought distancing myself would buy me some peace. I was so incredibly wrong. As I sat in the airport terminal waiting for my flight to board, my phone buzzed with an alert from the newly installed security system app. Front door activity detected. To understand why a 29-year-old man would pack his life into a single suitcase and completely ghost his entire family over an inheritance, you have to understand the ghosts of my past. You have to understand what it's like to grow up as the permanent understudy in a play where your older brother is the star, the director, and the executive producer. Lucas is 5 years older than me, and from the moment he could walk, he wore an invisible crown. He was the golden child, the athletic one, the charismatic one. I was the quiet one, the one who liked to read in the corner, the one who tried to fix broken radios in the garage instead of throwing a football. In my family, quiet was synonymous with defective. I remember the Thanksgiving dinners vividly. Our dining room table was this massive, polished oak thing. Lucas always sat at the right hand of my father, holding court, telling exaggerated stories about his high school football glory days or his frat house escapades. I was always relegated to the very end of the table, near the swinging kitchen door, expected to silently pass the mashed potatoes and clear the plates when everyone was done. There is a specific family photo from a Thanksgiving about 6 years ago. My parents are beaming in the center. Lucas has his arms wrapped around his beautiful wife, and his kids are smiling perfectly. If you look closely at the far left edge of the frame, half hidden behind a decorative floor lamp, you can see half of my face. I had literally set the camera timer, sprinted to get in the shot, and Lucas had casually shoved his shoulder out to block me. No one noticed. No one cared. The financial disparity was even more sickening. When Lucas went to college, my parents cheerfully drained a massive college fund to pay his tuition at a prestigious out-of-state university. He spent 4 years partying, barely scraping by with a business degree. When it was my turn, my father sat me down in his study, poured himself a scotch, and told me that building character was important for a young man. He told me the college fund had been somewhat depleted because they had to help Lucas with a down payment on his first home. I ended up working 40 hours a week at a local Walmart, pushing shopping carts in the freezing rain, just to pay for my textbooks at a community college before transferring to an online state program. I took out predatory student loans that kept me awake at night, sweating with panic. But the absolute breaking point, the memory that burned itself into my retinas, was Lucas's graduation. My parents threw him a massive backyard barbecue catered by a local steakhouse. In the middle of the party, my father clinked his glass, gave a teary-eyed speech about legacy, and handed Lucas a small black box. Inside were the keys to a brand new, midnight blue Porsche 911, a luxury sports car for a 22-year-old kid who didn't even have a job lined up. When I graduated with my bachelor's degree 4 years later, with honors, mind you, I got a generic Hallmark card with a printed signature and a bill from the university for my own cap and gown rental. I learned very early on that in my family, love was conditional, and the condition was being Lucas. So I built my own life. I clawed my way up the corporate ladder, secured a decent salary, moved into the city, and slowly faded into the background of their lives. I became the guy they only called when they needed someone to fix their computer or watch the house while they took family vacations to Hawaii without me. And then Grandpa Benjamin died. My grandfather was a quiet, stoic man who lived 3 states away. After my grandmother passed, he became something of a hermit. He sent the exact same birthday card every year. A generic mountain landscape with a crisp $20 bill tucked inside. I hadn't spoken to him on the phone in almost 5 years. At his funeral, the family dynamics were on full display. Lucas paraded around like the grieving patriarch, accepting condolences, while I stood in the back pew, watching the rain hit the stained glass windows. My parents barely acknowledged my presence. 2 weeks after the funeral, I received a certified letter requesting my presence at the office of Arthur Pendleton, the attorney handling my grandfather's estate. I assumed I was getting another crisp $20 bill and maybe an old watch. Pendleton's office was located in a high-end district of the city. I remember walking in, the heavy mahogany doors shutting out the street noise. The room smelled of expensive leather, aged paper, and dark roast coffee. My parents were already there, sitting rigidly in plush armchairs. Lucas was sprawling on a leather sofa, scrolling on his phone, looking utterly bored. I took a seat in the corner, keeping my coat on. Arthur Pendleton was a man who looked like he had never smiled in his life. He adjusted his silver-rimmed glasses, opened a thick manila folder, and cleared his throat. He skipped the pleasantries. He read through the standard legal jargon, the burial wishes, the minor charitable donations. And then he got to the primary assets. To my eldest grandson, Lucas, Pendleton read, his voice monotone and unyielding, I leave the vintage Chris Craft wooden boat, currently docked at the marina. May it bring him the leisure he has always sought. Lucas actually let out a small, arrogant chuckle. Awesome. Always loved that boat, he muttered, not looking up from his phone. Pendleton didn't acknowledge him. He turned the page. To my youngest grandson, Julian. I leave the entirety of my primary residence located at 42 Oakwood Drive, fully unencumbered by any mortgage or lien. Furthermore, I leave the remaining balance of my primary investment portfolio, currently valued at approximately $320,000, to be transferred immediately into his sole possession. The silence that fell over that mahogany office was so absolute, so heavy, it felt like all the oxygen had been sucked out of the room. Lucas's head snapped up, his phone slipping from his fingers and hitting the hardwood floor with a sharp crack. My mother, Eleanor, physically recoiled as if Pendleton had just slapped her across the face. My father's jaw literally dropped. I sat completely frozen. My heart started hammering against my ribs so violently I thought they could hear it. $320,000. And a house. A massive, beautiful suburban home. Wait, Lucas blurted out, standing up, his face flushing a deep, ugly red. Read that again. That's a mistake. He meant me. He meant the house and the accounts for me, and the boat for Julian. Pendleton slowly looked up over his glasses. His gaze was icy. I do not make mistakes, Mr. Lucas. And neither did your grandfather. The legal documentation is ironclad, updated just 6 months prior to his passing. This is unacceptable, Eleanor shrieked, finally finding her voice. She pointed a trembling finger at me. Julian doesn't even know how to maintain a property. He's single. Lucas has a family. We are challenging this. This is a fraudulent document. Pendleton closed the folder with a loud, definitive snap. You are welcome to attempt a lawsuit, ma'am. However, I assure you, Benjamin Moore was of entirely sound mind. He anticipated this exact reaction. In fact, he left a personal addendum addressed solely to Julian. Pendleton slid a sealed envelope across the desk toward me. My hands shook as I took it. I didn't open it then. Couldn't. I just stared at my name written in my grandfather's shaky, cursive handwriting. As we left the office, the hallway descended into pure chaos. Lucas grabbed my shoulder, spinning me around. You're going to fix this, Julian. You're going to sign it all over to me. You know damn well Grandpa was losing his mind. I looked at his hand on my shoulder, then looked up into his panicked, greedy eyes. For the first time in my life, I didn't shrink away. Take your hand off me, I said quietly. I walked out of the building, got into my beaten-up Honda Civic, and drove away, leaving them standing on the sidewalk. When I finally pulled over in an empty parking lot, I opened the letter. It was only 2 paragraphs. Julian, I have been quiet, but I have not been blind. I have watched for decades as you were pushed into the shadows so your brother could stand in the sun. I saw you pay for your own college. I saw the cheap gifts. I saw the way they made you feel small. I am leaving you this estate not just to balance the scales, but because you are the only one in this family who actually understands the value of a dollar earned. Do not give them a single penny. Build your life. Be the man I always knew you were. I gripped the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. Tears hot and fast spilled down my cheeks. Someone had seen me. Finally, someone had seen me. I thought the worst was over. I thought the truth was finally out in the open. I was so incredibly wrong. The storm didn't just break. It shattered everything I thought I knew about the depths my family would sink to. The weekend following the reading of the will was a masterclass in psychological warfare. My phone became a weapon. Lucas sent a barrage of text messages, alternating between raging threats and pathetic guilt trips. You know you owe this to me, right? He texted on Saturday morning. Do you have any idea how expensive it is to raise 3 kids? You sit in your apartment playing video games. You don't need a house. You don't need a 401k. Don't be a selfish piece of trash. I didn't reply. My silence seemed to drive them absolutely insane. On Sunday, my Aunt Sylvia called. Sylvia was my mother's sister, a woman who built her entire personality around being the family peacemaker, which really just meant she was the family enforcer draped in a sweet, Southern belle tone. Julian, honey, she cooed through the speaker. We are all just so worried about you. This money is changing you. Your mother is sick over this. She hasn't slept in days. You need to be the bigger person here. Think about your legacy. Think about your nephews. If you just transfer the real estate to Lucas, we can put all this ugliness behind us and be a family again. We were never a family, Sylvia, I said, my voice shockingly steady. I was just a prop. I hung up on her mid-gasp. I thought I could weather the emotional manipulation. I thought if I just ignored them, they would eventually realize I wasn't backing down and leave me alone. But I underestimated the sheer, venomous spite of my mother, Eleanor. When emotional blackmail failed, they decided to completely destroy my livelihood. Monday morning, I walked into my corporate office downtown. I was in a good mood despite the weekend trauma. I had been working 80-hour weeks for the past 6 months, spearheading a major logistics project. I was officially up for a promotion to senior director, a move that would bump my salary significantly and give me real authority. I poured my coffee, booted up my laptop, and within 10 minutes, my desk phone rang. It was HR. Julian, we need you in the conference room on the 4th floor. Now. The voice was sterile, leaving no room for questions. I walked into the glass-walled conference room. The director of human resources, a stern woman named Patricia, was sitting across from the company's legal counsel. My stomach completely dropped. This wasn't a promotion meeting. This was an interrogation. Sit down, Julian, Patricia said, sliding a printed email across the table toward me. We received this over the weekend through our anonymous corporate ethics portal. We are legally obligated to investigate. I picked up the paper. The email was meticulously written. It claimed that I, Julian, was currently embroiled in a massive, fraudulent lawsuit regarding contested assets and elder abuse. It stated that I was actively manipulating legal documents to steal a high-value real estate inheritance from my brother's young children, and that my lack of moral integrity posed a severe risk to the company's reputation. It strongly suggested I was financially unstable and potentially facing criminal charges. The air left my lungs. I felt dizzy. Someone was trying to get me fired. Someone was trying to rip away the only thing I had built entirely on my own, my career. This is a lie, I choked out, staring at the paper. This is an absolute fabrication. My grandfather left me his estate legally. My family is angry about it. There is no lawsuit. There is no fraud. Julian, These are extremely serious allegations involving elder abuse and contested real estate, the legal counsel said smoothly. While it is anonymous, the level of detail regarding your family structure and the inheritance is concerning. We have to place you on unpaid administrative leave pending a full internal investigation. If this hits the press, it's a liability. I felt a cold sweat break out on the back of my neck. Unpaid leave. If I lost my salary now, while paying property taxes on the new house and managing my own rent, I would be financially ruined before the estate even fully settled. I read the email again, scanning the words, desperate for a clue, and then I saw it, a specific phrasing. Depriving his nephews of their rightful college funds and future stability. My mother didn't write this. Lucas didn't write this. They weren't articulate enough to use corporate buzzwords. I knew exactly who wrote it. Sarah. Sarah was my mother's best friend, essentially a second mother to me growing up. She was a retired paralegal. She knew how to draft formal complaints. She knew exactly what words would trigger a corporate HR department into panic mode. Eleanor had weaponized the one person outside the family I still implicitly trusted. My own mother had ordered a hit on my career. The betrayal didn't just sting. It carved me hollow. I gripped the edge of the glass table, feeling the cold seep into my palms. I looked up at Patricia and the lawyer. I didn't beg. I didn't cry. I need exactly 2 hours, I said, my voice dropping an octave, completely devoid of emotion. Do not suspend me yet. Give me 2 hours. I will bring you the ironclad proof you need. I sprinted out of the building and practically flew to Arthur Pendleton's office. I didn't care about making an appointment. I burst through his mahogany doors. Pendleton looked up, startled. I quickly explained the corporate sabotage, the email, the threat to my salary and promotion. Pendleton's jaw tightened. If there was one thing Arthur Pendleton hated more than family drama, it was defamation involving his legal work. Within 45 minutes, Pendleton drafted a heavy, legally binding affidavit. It stated unequivocally that I was the sole, legal heir to the estate, that there was zero pending litigation, no evidence of fraud, and that Benjamin Moore was evaluated by an independent medical professional on the day the will was signed. Furthermore, Pendleton drafted a secondary document, a terrifyingly stern cease and desist letter addressed to the IP address associated with the anonymous email, threatening a massive defamation lawsuit that would bankrupt the sender. I marched back into my corporate office, bypassed HR entirely, and walked straight to the office of the CEO, a no-nonsense man named Robert who had mentored me. I asked his assistant for 5 minutes. I walked in, placed Pendleton's heavily stamped legal documents on his desk, and told him the unvarnished truth about my family's attempt to destroy my career over an inheritance. Robert read the documents in silence. He looked at the wax seals, the signature of one of the most respected estate lawyers in the city. Then he looked at me. "Your family plays dirty, Julian," Robert said quietly. "They do," I replied, holding his gaze. "But I don't. My work speaks for itself." Robert picked up his phone and dialed HR. "Patricia, the ethics complaint against Julian is definitively false. It's a targeted harassment campaign by estranged family members. Clear his file and expedite his promotion paperwork to senior director. He's going to need the authority." I walked out of Robert's office with my career saved, but as I rode the elevator down to the lobby, my legs finally gave out. I leaned against the metal wall, sliding down until I hit the floor. I had won the battle, but the emotional cost was devastating. They had tried to ruin my life. They had used Sarah. They had tried to take my salary, my reputation, my sanity. That night, back in my empty apartment, eating cold takeout, I hit absolute rock bottom. I stared at the wall, feeling completely, utterly alone in the world. I questioned if it was worth it. I questioned if I should just sign the papers and disappear. But then I looked at the letter from Grandpa Benjamin sitting on my counter. "Do not give them a single penny." I realized then that this was no longer just about a house or a 401k. This was about survival. It was about power and punishment. They couldn't believe I had stood up to them, so they were trying to burn the earth around me until I crawled back on my hands and knees. But I was done crawling. I wiped my face, stood up, and promised myself that I would not just survive this. I was going to utterly dismantle their reality. And the universe, in its twisted sense of humor, was about to hand me the perfect opportunity. The eye of a hurricane is a terrifying place. The wind stops, the sky clears, but you know, deep in your bones, that the most destructive wall of the storm is entirely ahead of you. For 3 weeks after the HR incident, there was absolute silence from my family. No texts, no voicemails, no manipulative calls from Aunt Sylvia. I had moved a few basic pieces of furniture into my grandfather's massive house. My house now, living out of boxes in the grand living room. I changed my phone number, completely deactivated all my social media, and focused entirely on my new role as senior director. I thought my firm boundaries and the threat of Pendleton's defamation lawsuit had finally scared them off. I was foolish to underestimate the sheer audacity of Lucas's entitlement. The silence shattered on a Tuesday morning. I was sitting at my desk reviewing quarterly logistics reports when my new private cell phone rang. It was an unknown local number. I hesitated, then answered. "Hello, is this Mr. Julian?" A chipper, overly enthusiastic female voice chirped. "Speaking," I said cautiously. "Oh, wonderful. This is Brenda, from Elite Suburban Real Estate. I'm just calling to confirm the listing agreement your brother, Lucas, started with us last week regarding the property at 42 Oakwood Drive. He mentioned you were the secondary contact handling the paperwork. We have a highly motivated buyer who loved the interior photos Lucas provided, and we'd love to fast-track the open house this weekend." I stopped breathing. The office around me faded into a dull hum. I gripped the phone so hard the plastic creaked. "Brenda," I said, my voice dropping to a terrifyingly calm whisper. "Did you say Lucas provided interior photos?" "Yes, he sent them over on Thursday. Beautiful wainscoting in that dining room. By the way, Brenda, listen to me very carefully," I said, standing up from my desk. "Lucas has zero legal rights to that property. I am the sole owner. I have not authorized a sale. If you list that house, I will personally hold your brokerage liable for fraudulent real estate practices." Brenda gasped, stammering apologies, realizing she had stepped into a legal landmine. I hung up on her before she could finish. My blood ran completely cold. Interior photos. I hadn't given Lucas a key. My grandfather's old keys were sitting in my pocket. That meant only one thing. Lucas had physically broken into my house. I didn't panic. I didn't call him to scream. The time for arguing was over. I left the office, got into my car, and broke several speed limits driving to the estate. When I pulled into the wide, paved driveway, my heart hammered against my ribs. I walked up the brick pathway to the front porch, and there it was. Hanging obnoxiously from the brass doorknob was a chunky, black real estate lockbox. He had actually hired a locksmith, claimed to be the owner, and changed the damn locks on my inheritance. Rage doesn't always come in a flash of yelling and throwing things. Sometimes it comes in a wave of absolute freezing clarity. I didn't touch the lockbox. I pulled out my phone and took high-resolution photos of it, making sure to capture the house number in the frame. I recorded a video of myself walking the perimeter, documenting that there was no forced entry on the windows, proving he used a locksmith under false pretenses. Then, I drove straight to the local police precinct. I walked up to the front desk and laid the deed to the house, Arthur Pendleton's legal affidavit, and the photos of the lockbox on the counter. "I need to file a report for breaking and entering, trespassing, and attempted real estate fraud against my brother," I told the desk sergeant. The officer was surprisingly sympathetic. He took the report, officially documenting Lucas's crime. He advised me to cut the lockbox off and change the locks immediately. I did exactly that. But I didn't just hire any locksmith. I hired a specialized commercial security contractor. By 8 p.m. that night, the house was fortified like a bank vault. Brand new deadbolts, reinforced door frames, and high-definition, motion-activated, night vision cameras hidden discreetly around the porch, the driveway, and the backyard. I didn't tell my parents. I didn't tell Aunt Sylvia. I didn't send Lucas a warning text. I just went back to my apartment in the city, opened my laptop, and watched the live feed of the empty porch. I was setting a silent trap. I only had to wait 4 days. It was 11:30 p.m. on a Saturday. My phone buzzed on the nightstand. Motion alert, front porch. I sat bolt upright in bed, my heart pounding in my throat. I opened the security app. The night vision camera feed was crystal clear in black and white. Walking up the steps, wearing a dark hoodie pulled up over his head, was Lucas. He marched up to the door with the arrogant stride of a man who believed the world belonged to him. He reached into his pocket, pulled out the key the fraudulent locksmith had given him, and shoved it into the newly replaced deadbolt. It didn't turn. I watched through the screen as confusion washed over his face. He jiggled it. He shoved his shoulder against the heavy wood. Nothing. Then, he looked down at the doorknob and realized the massive black real estate lockbox was completely gone. Lucas froze. He stepped back, his chest heaving. And then he looked up. He looked directly into the lens of the hidden camera tucked beneath the porch light. He saw the faint red recording light blinking in the darkness. Even through the grainy night vision, I could see the exact moment the color drained from his face. He realized he wasn't sneaking into a vacant family home. He was caught on high-definition video committing a felony at an actively monitored property. He didn't say a word. He turned on his heel and practically sprinted down the driveway, his tires screeching as he sped off into the night. I sat in my dark bedroom, the glow of the phone screen illuminating my face, and I smiled. I downloaded the footage. I backed it up to 3 different cloud servers. I forwarded a copy to Arthur Pendleton with a single subject line: evidence. But as I sat there, looking at the footage of the house my grandfather built, a profound realization washed over me. Keeping the house empty, treating it like a fortress to keep my family out, meant they were still dictating how I lived. They were still turning my inheritance into a battlefield. If I really wanted to win, I couldn't just lock the doors. I had to transform the legacy. I had to make it loudly, undeniably mine. The next morning, I picked up the phone and called Elias, an old college acquaintance who had become one of the most sought-after architectural designers in the city. "Elias," I said when he answered, "I have a mid-century suburban estate. I want to gut the interior, preserve the historical bones, and turn it into a high-end, exclusive creative retreat. And I need to do it fast. Money is no object. I wasn't just going to live in that house. I was going to turn it into a thriving, highly publicized business. I was going to build a monument to my independence right in their backyard. The silent war was over. I was preparing the ultimate stage, and my family had absolutely no idea the curtain was about to rise. Transforming a massive mid-century suburban home into a high-end, exclusive creative space isn't just about knocking down walls or updating the plumbing. It is about changing the very soul of the property. For the next 6 months, I poured every ounce of my energy, my pain, and a significant portion of my salary into what I officially registered as the Legacy Retreat. Elias, the architectural designer I hired, was a genius. We stripped away the dark, oppressive wallpapers that my grandmother had favored and exposed the original, breathtaking hardwood floors. We expanded the back patio, installed massive floor-to-ceiling windows to let the natural light flood the living spaces, and converted the detached garage into a soundproofed writer's studio. During this entire process, I kept an incredibly low profile. I went to my corporate job, managed my newly promoted logistics team, and spent my evenings covered in sawdust and paint. The neighborhood started to notice the transformation. That was how I formally met Mrs. Higgins, the elderly woman who lived 2 doors down. She came over one afternoon with a tray of homemade lemon bars, navigating the construction equipment with surprising agility. She had been good friends with my grandfather, Benjamin. Sitting on the newly framed front porch, amidst the smell of cut pine and fresh soil, she told me stories about him that I had never heard. She told me how he used to sit on this very porch, drinking his black coffee, watching the cars go by. She said he used to talk about me. Not about Lucas, about me. He told her I was the one who had the quiet strength of our ancestors, the one who didn't need applause to do the right thing. Hearing that from a stranger validated every single late-night panic attack I had endured. It fueled my fire. While the physical real estate was being transformed, I was also quietly building my ultimate weapon. I hired a local, incredibly talented documentary filmmaker named Chloe. I brought her in under the guise of filming a promotional video for the retreat's upcoming website. But I gave her access to everything. The legal affidavits from Arthur Pendleton, the recorded voicemails, the security footage of Lucas, the traced HR email from Sarah. I told her the true story of my family. Chloe, who had dealt with her own toxic family dynamics regarding a bitter divorce and custody battle in her past, was fully invested. We spent hours in the makeshift studio, editing, cutting, and shaping a narrative that was bulletproof. As the retreat neared completion, the silence from my family continued. They assumed they had won the psychological war. They assumed my silence meant I was isolated, depressed, and slowly drowning under the weight of the property taxes and the maintenance. They probably thought I would come crawling back to them, begging Lucas to take the house off my hands. It was time to set the bait. I worked with a boutique printing press downtown to design the invitations for the grand opening of the Legacy Retreat. They were heavy, cream-colored cardstock with elegant gold foil embossing. They looked like invitations to a high society charity gala. The text was simple. Julian more cordially invites you to the grand opening of the Legacy Retreat, a celebration of heritage, art, and truth. I sent these invitations to everyone. I didn't just send them to my parents and my brother. I sent them to Aunt Sylvia. I sent them to Sarah, the family friend who tried to get me fired. I sent them to the president of the local homeowners association, the pastor of my parents' church, my father's golf buddies, and the prominent neighbors who had known our family for decades. I blanketed their entire social circle with these beautiful, undeniable pieces of paper. I knew exactly how my mother's mind worked. When she opened that envelope, she wouldn't see an olive branch. She would see an opportunity. She would assume I was hosting some pathetic little party to show off my inheritance, and she would see it as the perfect stage to show up, play the benevolent matriarch, and publicly remind everyone that I was just the wayward son who got lucky. She would want to secure her social standing. Sure enough, 3 days after the invitations were delivered, I got a text from Eleanor. It was the first direct communication in months. Your father and I received your little invitation. We will attend. Lucas and Megan are coming too. Please make sure the catering is appropriate for the children. We need to discuss the future of the property after the party. I didn't reply. I just forwarded the RSVP count to the caterers. The night of the grand opening was flawless. It was a crisp autumn evening. The exterior of the house was illuminated by warm, strategically placed landscape lighting, highlighting the restored brickwork and the sprawling oak trees. Inside, a string quartet was playing softly in the corner of the expanded living room. Waiters in black vests circulated with trays of champagne and hors d'oeuvres. The local community leaders, the artists I had invited, and my supportive co-workers, including my loyal friend Marcus, were mingling happily. At exactly 7:30 p.m., the front doors opened, and my family arrived. It was like watching a perfectly rehearsed play. My father, Richard, walked in first, wearing his expensive tailored suit, his chest puffed out, shaking hands with the HOA president as if he were the one hosting the event. Eleanor followed, draped in a cashmere shawl, wearing a tight, patronizing smile. Lucas and his wife Megan walked in last. Lucas was wearing a blazer and designer jeans, looking around the stunningly renovated interior with a mixture of intense greed and deep confusion. He couldn't compute how the quiet, supposedly struggling younger brother had orchestrated something this sophisticated. I watched them from across the room. They immediately started working the crowd. I saw Eleanor corner Mrs. Higgins, undoubtedly trying to spin some narrative about how proud she was that Julian was finally doing something productive with the family's real estate. I saw Lucas inspecting the high-end kitchen appliances, probably calculating the resale value in his head. They looked so incredibly smug. They felt completely in control. They were standing in my house, drinking my champagne, fully believing that by the end of the night, they would corner me in the study and bully me into signing over a percentage of the business. They had walked directly into the trap, and they were admiring the cheese. Marcus walked up to me, handing me a fresh glass of sparkling water. He looked over at Lucas, who was currently laughing loudly at a joke my father made. "Are you ready for this?" Marcus asked quietly. I took a slow sip of the water, feeling my heartbeat steady into a calm, rhythmic pulse. The fear was completely gone. There was only the cold, sharp edge of absolute certainty. "I've been ready my entire life," I said. I set the glass down, walked over to the string quartet, and politely asked them to pause. I picked up the small silver microphone I had prepared. The soft hum of conversation in the room slowly died down as all eyes turned to me. I looked directly at my parents. The trap was about to spring. "Ladies and gentlemen, friends, and esteemed members of the community." My voice rang out, clear and steady, amplified through the hidden speakers Elias had installed in the ceiling. "Thank you all for being here tonight to celebrate the launch of the Legacy Retreat. This property has been in my family for a very long time. My grandfather, Benjamin Moore, built more than just a house here. He built a sanctuary." I saw my father, Richard, nod approvingly from the center of the room, playing the role of the proud patriarch perfectly. Eleanor was smiling, holding her champagne flute elegantly. Lucas had his arms crossed, looking slightly bored, waiting for the sentimental speech to end. "When my grandfather passed," I continued, pacing slowly across the beautiful hardwood floor, "he left this estate to me. It was a surprise to many. It was a shock to some. But he left it to me with a very specific purpose. He wanted to ensure that the truth of our family's legacy was preserved. Tonight, instead of a traditional ribbon cutting, I want to share a short documentary piece. It's about the journey of this house. It's about inheritance. And most importantly, it's about the truth." I gestured to Marcus, who was standing by the media control panel. The main lights in the massive living room dimmed to a soft glow. A hidden motorized projector screen smoothly rolled down from the ceiling covering the large bay windows. The high-definition projector flickered to life. The video started beautifully. Soft, acoustic guitar music played over vintage photographs of my grandfather standing on the porch in the 1980s. There were shots of the recent renovations, time-lapse of Elias and me tearing down walls and building something new. I saw the audience smiling. I saw Mrs. Higgins wipe a tear from her eye. Even my mother looked relaxed, assuming this was just a vanity project. Then the music stopped abruptly. The screen cut to black. In stark, white, cinematic text, the title appeared, "A Quiet Inheritance: The Anatomy of Family Greed." The first sound that filled the room was not a voiceover. It was an actual, unedited audio recording. It was the frantic, aggressive voicemail my father had left me the morning after I fled the city. "Julian, you listen to me and you listen to me good. You are tearing this family apart over pure greed. You transfer those assets to Lucas by the end of the week, or you are dead to us. You don't deserve a dime of that man's money, and you know it." A collective, audible gasp swept through the room. The HOA president nearly dropped his drink. I watched Richard's face instantly drain of all color. He froze completely, his mouth slightly open, staring at the screen as his own voice echoed off the walls, exposing the vicious, abusive tone he hid behind his country club persona. Before anyone could recover, the screen flashed to a high-resolution screenshot of a text message thread. The sender was clearly labeled as Lucas. "You know you owe this to me, right? Do you have any idea how expensive it is to raise 3 kids? You sit in your apartment playing video games. You don't need a house. You don't need a 401k. Don't be a selfish piece of trash." Lucas practically jumped backward, bumping into a high-top table. His wife, Megan, stared at the screen, her eyes wide with shock. The murmurs in the room started growing louder. But the documentary wasn't done. Chloe had edited it with the precision of a prosecuting attorney. The screen transitioned to a formal corporate document. It was the anonymous HR email sent to my company, accusing me of elder abuse and legal fraud. The camera panned slowly down the text, highlighting the malicious lies meant to destroy my career and strip me of my salary. Then, right beside the email, Arthur Pendleton's official legal subpoena appeared, tracing the IP address directly to the home network of Sarah. I looked over at Sarah, who was standing near the kitchen island. She put her hand over her mouth, looking like she was going to be sick. Several people physically stepped away from her. And then came the grand finale. The screen cut to grainy, black and white night vision footage. The timestamp in the corner read 11:34 p.m. The audience watched in dead silence as a man in a hoodie walked up the very steps they had just climbed to enter the party. They watched him pull out a key. They watched him try to force his way into the house. And then, they watched Lucas look up directly into the camera lens, his face clearly illuminated by the infrared light, the guilt and panic etched into every feature. The text on the screen read, "Attempted unauthorized entry and real estate fraud by Lucas Moore. Key provided by a fraudulent locksmith hire." The video faded to black. The lights in the room snapped back on to full brightness. The silence in that room was absolute. It was the kind of silence that rings in your ears. No one moved. No one spoke. The string quartet players were sitting perfectly still, their bows resting on their knees. I stood in the center of the room, perfectly calm, my hands resting easily in my pockets. I looked directly at my family. My father looked like he was having a medical emergency. His face was a mottled purple, his chest heaving, but he couldn't form a single word because his entire social circle, the people he played golf with, the people he went to church with, had just witnessed his true character. My mother, Eleanor, was shaking violently. Her perfect, patronizing mask had been ripped off and set on fire. She looked around the room, desperate for someone to make eye contact with her, desperate for an ally, but the community leaders and neighbors were staring at her with pure, unadulterated disgust. Lucas took a step toward me, his fists clenched, his face contorted in rage. You little piece of... I would highly suggest you don't finish that sentence, Lucas, I said, my voice cutting through the tension like a razor blade. Not in front of 50 witnesses. Not in my house. I turned my gaze to my parents. For 29 years, you made me feel like an outsider in my own bloodline. You demanded my silence so you could maintain the illusion of a perfect family. When Grandpa Benjamin saw the truth and tried to give me a foundation, you tried to steal it. You tried to ruin my career. You broke into my property. You slandered my name. I pointed to the massive front doors. This estate is a sanctuary for truth, and there is no room for you here. Get out of my house. All of you, and if any of you ever attempt to contact me, approach this property, or speak to my employer again, my lawyer has a defamation and harassment lawsuit ready to file that will financially ruin you. Get out. My mother let out a strangled sob. She reached out toward me, a pathetic attempt at manipulation even in her total defeat. Julian, please, you're humiliating us. No, Mother, I replied coldly. I'm just playing the documentary. You humiliated yourselves. Richard grabbed Eleanor by the arm, roughly pulling her toward the door. Lucas followed, his head down, practically dragging Megan behind him. The guests parted like the Red Sea, refusing to speak to them, refusing to look at them. I watched the heavy front doors close behind them. The click of the deadbolt locking echoed loudly in the quiet room. I turned back to my guests. I took a deep breath, feeling a massive, invisible weight lift off my shoulders. I smiled genuinely for the first time that night. Now, I said, signaling the string quartet, let's pour some more champagne and actually celebrate. Let's pause for a moment. Thank you for staying with me this far, you're truly amazing. Please help me by liking the video and commenting the number 1 below so I know you've been here with me until this point. This not only helps more people discover this story, but also lets me know that my experiences mean something to someone. Your support is the greatest motivation for me to keep sharing the rest of this journey. The nuclear fallout from the grand opening was swift, brutal, and entirely of their own making. You cannot drop a bomb of truth in the middle of a wealthy suburban community and expect the dust to settle quietly. By Monday morning, the gossip mill had gone into absolute overdrive. My father, Richard, experienced the immediate consequences of his exposed hypocrisy. For years, he had positioned himself as a pillar of the community, a senior executive who preached about family values and moral integrity. But the HOA president, the local business owners, and his golf buddies had all heard the venom in his voice on that voicemail. They had seen the proof of his complicity in trying to ruin his own son. Within a week, Richard was quietly asked to step down from the board of his prestigious country club. Several high-profile clients at his firm requested to be transferred to other executives. It wasn't a formal firing, but it was a soft demotion, a total loss of the prestige he valued more than his own children. Eleanor, completely incapable of accepting defeat, tried her usual tactic, playing the victim on social media. 2 days after the party, she posted a massive, rambling essay on Facebook. She didn't address the break-in or the HR email, of course. She just vaguely lamented about narcissistic children who rewrite history and how money destroys families, begging for prayers during this season of spiritual warfare. In the past, her church friends would have flooded the comments with support. But this time, the silence was deafening. The few people who did comment were neighbors who had been at the party. One woman simply replied, "We saw the video, Eleanor. Stop lying." Eleanor deleted her entire Facebook account 3 hours later. Even Aunt Sylvia, the eternal meddler, completely distanced herself, realizing that associating with my parents was now social suicide. As for Lucas, the golden child's ego was fractured beyond repair. He couldn't handle the reality that his quiet, submissive younger brother had utterly outmaneuvered him. On Wednesday night, my phone buzzed. It was a text from an unknown number, but I recognized the aggressive cadence immediately. "You think you're so smart. You think you won because you embarrassed Mom and Dad. That house is still mine by right. Grandpa was senile. I'm going to contest the will again. I'm going to drag this out in court until you go bankrupt from legal fees. Watch your back." He still thought I was playing a game. He still thought he could intimidate me. I didn't reply to the text. I took a screenshot and emailed it directly to Arthur Pendleton. The next morning, Lucas was served with a formal, court-ordered restraining order at his place of work. It mandated that he remain at least 500 feet away from me, my residence, and my place of employment at all times. Furthermore, Pendleton sent a blistering legal notice to Lucas's attorney, attaching the video evidence of the attempted break-in and explicitly stating that any further frivolous attempts to contest the ironclad will would result in immediate countersuits for harassment and legal fee compensation. Lucas was finally silenced. The golden boy was legally gagged. The final piece of the puzzle fell into place on a Friday afternoon. I was sitting in the newly finished sunroom of the retreat, reviewing booking requests on my laptop, when my private cell phone rang. I recognized the landline number. It was my parents' house. I hesitated for a fraction of a second before answering. I put it on speakerphone and set it on the glass table. "Julian." Eleanor's voice came through the speaker. It wasn't angry. It wasn't commanding. Sounded thin, fragile, and desperate. "Julian, please, just talk to me for a minute." "I'm listening," I said, my voice completely flat. "Your father's blood pressure is through the roof. People are avoiding us at the grocery store. Sarah won't even return my calls because she's terrified you're actually going to sue her. Julian, this has gone too far. You made your point. You heard us. Now please take down the video. Tell everyone it was a misunderstanding. We can go to family counseling. We can try to fix this." She wasn't apologizing for what they did. She was apologizing for getting caught. She wanted me to clean up the mess her toxicity had created to protect her social standing. "There is no misunderstanding, Eleanor," I said calmly. "Everything in that video was a fact. You tried to force me to give up my inheritance. You manipulated Sarah into trying to get me fired so I would lose my salary and be financially dependent on you. Lucas tried to break into my home. "We are your family," she suddenly screamed, the fragility instantly vanishing, replaced by the familiar, demanding monster. "You owe us respect." "I owed you nothing, and you took everything you could," I replied. "This is the consequence of your own actions. You wanted a legacy, mother. Well, this is yours. Your legacy is the truth of who you are. Do not ever call this number again." I pressed end. I blocked the landline. I blocked their cell phones. I completely severed the rotting branch from my life. The storm was finally over. The air was clear. And for the first time in 29 years, I was completely unapologetically free. A year is a strange measurement of time. When you are trapped in a toxic environment, a year can feel like an eternity of holding your breath. But when you are finally free, when you are building a life entirely on your own terms, a year flashes by in a beautiful, vibrant blur. 12 months after the grand opening, the Legacy Retreat was not just a success. It was a phenomenon. I had kept my corporate job, fully transitioning into my senior director role, utilizing my salary to fund the initial operating costs of the business. But the retreat quickly became self-sustaining. The house was fully booked 6 months in advance. We hosted painters, musicians, and writers who needed a quiet, inspiring place to escape the noise of the world and focus on their art. One of our most notable guests was Clara, a prominent, best-selling author who booked the retreat for an entire month to finish her highly anticipated novel. Clara was an elegant woman in her late 60s, sharp-witted and incredibly observant. During her final week, I invited her to have coffee on the back patio. We sat looking out over the manicured lawn as the autumn leaves began to turn brilliant shades of orange and gold. "You've built something remarkable here, Julian," Clara said, resting her hands on her coffee mug. "Most houses of this size, with this kind of history, they feel heavy. They feel burdened by the ghosts of the past. But this place feels light. It feels like a deep exhale." "It took a lot of work to clear the air," I admitted with a small, knowing smile. A few weeks after Clara left, a major national lifestyle magazine published an article she had written about her creative process. A significant portion of the piece was dedicated to the Legacy Retreat. She described it as a sanctuary built from the ashes of family expectation, a testament to the power of claiming your own space in the world. The exposure pushed the retreat to an entirely new level of prestige. The irony was not lost on me. My family had tried to use their social status to destroy me, and now my success was being celebrated on a national scale. It was shortly after the article was published that the final letter arrived. I found it in the mail stack one afternoon. There was no return address, just my name scrawled in handwriting I hadn't seen in over a year. "Lucas." I walked into the kitchen, grabbed a letter opener, and sliced the envelope. Given the restraining order, sending this letter was a risk on his part. I expected another barrage of insults, or maybe a pathetic plea for money. But as I unfolded the single piece of notebook paper, I realized it was something entirely different. "Julian, I know I'm not supposed to contact you. If you give this to your lawyer, I understand. I just needed to say this. Dad was forced into early retirement. Mom barely leaves the house. Everything fell apart after that night. I lost my job at the firm because of the background check issues following the police report you filed. My wife, Megan, took the kids and moved to her parents' house. We're finalizing the divorce." I stopped reading for a moment, letting the sheer weight of his reality sink in. The golden child had lost his crown, his kingdom, and his family. I looked back down at the paper. "I always hated you, Julian. I hated how quiet you were. I hated how you just took the hits and kept moving. But mostly, I hated you because of what Grandpa Benjamin told me. 3 days before he died, I went to visit him in the hospital. I asked him about the inheritance. I asked him if the college funds for my kids were secure. He looked at me, and he said, 'Lucas, you have spent your entire life demanding the world hand you everything on a silver platter. You are a hollow shell of a man wrapped in expensive clothes. I am leaving the estate to Julian, because Julian is the only one in this bloodline who actually possesses the character to build a legacy, instead of just spending it.' He knew I was empty. He knew you were the real man. I tried to destroy you because I was terrified he was right. And you proved him right. Keep the house. I never deserved it. Lucas. I stood in the silence of my beautiful kitchen, holding the letter. It was the absolute, undeniable closure I didn't even know I was waiting for. The final twist wasn't a knife in the back. It was a confession. Lucas had known the truth all along. His arrogance was just a frantic cover for his deep, paralyzing insecurity. I didn't feel a surge of triumph reading about his divorce or my father's ruined career. I just felt a profound, overwhelming sense of peace. The cycle of trauma ended with me. I took the letter, walked over to the paper shredder in my office, and destroyed it. I didn't need to keep his confession. I was already living my truth. Later that afternoon, I drove to a local nursery and bought a young sugar maple sapling. I brought it back to the estate, carried it to the center of the expansive backyard, and started digging. The physical labor felt good. The soil was rich and dark. I planted the tree carefully, tamping down the dirt around its base, and gave it plenty of water. Grandpa Benjamin loved sugar maples. He loved how they stood strong through the bitter winters and burst into brilliant color in the fall. I stood back, wiping the dirt from my hands, and looked at the small tree, then up at the sprawling, magnificent house. Legacy isn't about the money in a bank account. It isn't about real estate or who gets the vintage boat. Legacy is about the emotional foundation you leave behind. My parents tried to build a legacy on control, manipulation, and the destruction of the child who didn't fit their perfect narrative. But they failed. I took the shattered pieces of my inheritance, the pain, the betrayal, and the silence, and I built a fortress of peace. I built a place where people come to heal, to create, and to breathe. Thank you for listening to my story. I know there are so many of you out there who are the black sheep of your family. The ones who are expected to stay quiet, to take the abuse, to hand over your boundaries because they are family. But I am here to tell you that family is not a free pass for abuse. You have the right to walk away. You have the right to protect your peace, your career, and your sanity. You are allowed to build a beautiful life without them in it. Have you ever faced something similar with your own family? Have you ever had to establish an unbreakable boundary to survive? Share your story in the comments below, and don't forget to like and subscribe so you don't miss the next journey. Keep building your legacy, and never, ever let them dim your light.